If it happens in Vancouver, you'll hear it on CKNW. News, weather, traffic, sports, and everything else. CKNW News Talk 980.
CKNW News Talk 980. Vancouver.
Well, you heard the directors of the Mount Pleasant Residents Association. Their concerns about a new high-rise. Gordon Price is director of the city program at SFU and a former city councillor. So you were listening. Is this something is this a debate that's going to go on in nearly every neighborhood in Metro Vancouver in the next 10 years?
No, not Metro. It certainly will in Vancouver. But if you look at Burnaby, you can see that issue is settled. Actually, back in the 70s, if you look at the planning of Burnaby and what it looks like now, high-rises around transit lines, that vision was established and they've just built it out.
Is there anything wrong with the concept of high-rises around transit?
There are lots of different ways to do it, and the high-rise becomes a symbol, an important one. It does have an immediate impact. And Mount Pleasant's a pretty good example. The Lee Building, if you can remember what it looks like at Broadway and Main Street. There was a building there that was built back in the streetcar era. If you built that today, if there was nothing else around it, it would have as much psychological impact, and I think the reaction would be the same. But once built, it becomes part of the fabric of the community. So, on one hand, I have to acknowledge, absolutely, it's very disruptive. On the other hand, people get used to it very quickly.
But is it not efficient to build density around transit?
Oh, well, that's the regional plan. That's been in place since, you could argue, the vision goes back to the 1940s. And to a great extent, this region has built it out. And we see the same now on the Cambie Corridor. There's a mid-rise form, mostly, except for a few places like Oak Ridge and Marine Station, that more or less fits that vision that your previous guests were talking about.
But 20 years ago, people were concerned if a high-rise came in, that was going to add tremendously to the traffic in the area. People are going to be driving their cars out of the the downstairs parkade and into the streets. Now they're walking out of the high-rise and getting on a bus or getting on transit.
Yeah. Well, too much focus, I think, on high-rise. You've got to have a whole bunch of things in place before that happens, and Vancouver's been fortunate that we have. But if you focus simply on the form of the building, you're really going to miss the story. And I think that's true for medium-rise as well. I understand the argument that you can certainly fit as much density in a medium-rise building. That is true. A higher building is not necessarily denser than a lower one. But the dilemma here is that if you really are going to have a city like Vienna or Paris, kind of a 6 to 8 story, you're talking about going in and really changing the character of a community. You are talking about rezoning what on at least appearance looks to be a single-family neighborhood. Front yard, side yards, backyard. If you're going to go in and completely rezone it, over time, yes, you can get that fabric. But I can tell you, the political capital you would have to invest won't give you a good return. There will be pushback. It's very hard to assemble those sites. It's not a form that fits well into a neighborhood that, has grown up around the form it was built with. And if you want to say that, and this I see in the Grandview plan as well as Mount Pleasant, then you do concentrate the densities in a few places where you can.
Let me open the phone, 604-280-9898. Toll free 1-877-399-9898. It's interesting the degree to which people in neighborhoods want to have a say, want to determine the future of their neighborhood.
And this is part of it. These kind of controversies are reflective of that. People do get passionate. It reflects their attachment, their concern about the neighborhood. It reflects the fear of precedent. It reflects, in a sense, it's the future colliding with the present. And it's very hard to get your head around a number like 130 or 150,000 people over the next 30 years, or even the 3,000 to 5,000 that means every year, because we've been able to absorb it, and we've done it primarily by building out on what you call brownfield sites, old industrial yards. We haven't had to go into the single-family.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you look at Cole Harbour, when you look at Falls Creek, even to a degree Yaletown, you're looking at the transforming what was industrial land.
Yes.
You're not looking at changing a neighborhood dramatically.
Absolutely. You don't have to evict anyone. You don't have to go in and demolish very much. And because it's not affecting people immediately, not literally in their neighborhoods, they've been accepting of it. We've put thousands of units per year in the 90s, and it's taken some of the pressure off the existing neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It's certainly true that this is more expensive housing to build, but if you didn't, the people who can afford that housing have to go to the existing neighborhoods and compete with the people who are already there. My neighborhood, West End, it's still a lower middle-income rental neighborhood. That hasn't changed in about 30, 40 years. But that's only because downtown South, Triangle West, Cole Harbour, Yaletown has taken some of that pressure off of them.
But it's going to have to be rebuilt soon, too.
Well, there's a dilemma. If you go in and you start demolishing that, the low-hanging fruit, you are talking about the affordable housing. So because there's no senior government housing programs, councils are faced with this trade-off. Do you increase the density in order to get more units that will take, again, some of the pressure off of the existing housing? It's a very tough thing to try and square.
Robert, good morning.
I like your guest this morning. You provide some nuance and reason to this whole debate about this stuff, which often gets hysterical at the community level. And I live in Dunbar, and just to express some frustration, I like to be involved with what's going on in the community and concerned about what's happening. But the NIMBYs, we have to call them, they use really desperate tactics. They distort everything. They provide misinformation. They jack up the fear of the neighborhood to the point where a rational conversation is impossible. And this has been escalating through the years. There's a lot of criticism to the mayor of Vancouver for lack of consultation, but I think a certain amount has to be worn by the other side for jacking up the hysteria and irrationality, and it's very frustrating.
Well, there's three things you can do when you are trying to deal with growth. You can try and build more housing. We've heard those arguments. Second, it's arithmetic. More people, same amount of floor space, you crowd. Smaller units, probably for the same price or more, or you try the strategy of, quote, invisible or hidden density, secondary suites, lane cottages. Or the third thing is you drive the price up to the point where people are forced out of the city because they can't afford it. And so you have to accommodate them in, well, the suburbs, along transit lines. And basically that's what Vancouver has been doing. Burnaby has solved, to some extent, our housing problems.
People moving to Burnaby.
Well, along the SkyTrain lines,
yep.
People who couldn't afford to live here, but they have easy access into the city. And so basically, there's that arbitrary line along Boundary Road, but you really do have to think about this regionally.
Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning to your guest. I guess my comment would be that if the opponents of the high rises or the developments that you're speaking of are so adamant, why is it so expensive then to redevelop any kind of single family dwelling or add a laneway house in the city of Vancouver currently? I mean, it's over $35,000 to $50,000 before you put a shovel in the ground if you'd like to take an older home and either renovate it or expand it or God forbid, demolish it and put up something else.
Sure.
Yeah, it's expensive, isn't it? Yeah, indicating a bunch of things. If we get into we're give me another hour or two here, Bill, and maybe we can try and get into the weeds on that one. But yeah, no, basically we just have this demand and a very difficult time supplying housing on the scale that would really make a difference to the price. We could do it, and we have in the past, but we've run out of land, so that price just keeps getting bid up. And it's very difficult to throw enough housing on the market to really make a difference.
Lewis, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Gordon.
Good morning.
I want to challenge you on the idea that we need to build towers to save single-family residents or single-family neighborhoods. And I also want to hear your views on the escalating cost of housing and what the influences of these rezonings and these comprehensive development one project is on raising the land values in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, I think it probably does have some measurable effect. Certainly if the expectation on the part of the development community is that currently zoned land will change, the precedent argument, you allow one tower, you're going to allow more, then yeah, but you'll unleash some speculative forces. But I doubt, first of all, that happens very often. Secondly, I don't think it is what determines the price over the medium or long term. I think there are other factors. Tell me what interest rates are going to be, immigration. Tell me the number of jobs and what they pay. And remember, you've got a variety of housing markets here. Certainly there's a big difference between buying housing and renting it. You don't borrow money to rent. Therefore, that market has to be different. And what's kind of interesting about Vancouver is that the rental market, while still expensive, is still affordable for middle and lower middle income people. So, as I say, once you pull the first layer off, you find there are lots of others. I'm not going to deny, though, that once you go in and you rebuild housing in a different form, the market will begin to say, I wonder what else we can get away with.
We talk about how expensive this is as a city to live in, but it seems to me that the past 3 or 4 years, the costs have been pretty flat.
It's flattened out, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again,
but still expensive.
Too many factors to be able to, and at least my knowledge, and even if even those who say they know, they're not as rich as they should be if they really did. Migration and interest rates, I think, are bigger forces here than what we do as far as rezonings from year to year.
My thanks to Gordon Price. The news headlines next.